Hello there, everyone. So I guess this is a little bit of a retrospective or a feedback session for the lockdown lecture series. Thanks for taking the time to have a chat today. It's obviously a little bit informal, but we thought we'd record this just for essentially the fact that it is documented. And I guess we've been living this as a true experiment and living by our words that we preach to students to say that we've set an experiment out into the world, got feedback, and wondering what the learnings are from that. So I don't know whether anyone wants to jump in there and go first, but please go for it.
I was going to say I'd like to hear from anybody else first, because obviously I'm quite involved in it. It would be nice just to get, I don't know, some other perspective on it as well.
I felt disappointed yesterday with the amount of turnout there was for the review. And I think probably that is just a timing thing, not a quality issue, because I think they've got a lot of work to be in for Monday. This is years 1 and 2. And year 3 have just dropped off the radar completely, because they could have really done with the latter stages of the lecture series to really get their heads in the right headspace for sort of career entry stuff, do you know what I mean, and the broader issues. And I think that years 1 and 2 didn't engage with the latter, possibly the latter stages of that, because they've got a big exam submission for Monday, and year 3 had a big exam submission for last Monday. So I think the timing was there, but certainly from my perspective, I'd really like to put these in a series of online lectures where we're expecting students to have a look at them, and then to do a write-up or a review of what the findings are, to come up with their own interpretation and their own perspective on some of the issues that you've raised, you know, and to maybe question and to look at how they could develop. So I think that's really useful, and especially with what's going to be happening in September, because I'm getting requests left, right and centre to see how we can change our delivery. And of course in our subject, that's probably more problematic, isn't it? Especially with year 1, when we're trying to build them up to be, you know, sort of resilient and everything, and have prototyping skills and working. So there's lots of work to be done, and I think this will tie in perfectly with that in a series of lectures. I think if we were to say, watch this lecture, watch your analysis of it, and then have a Q&A, we'd get a lot more. Say for example, it's like everything else, isn't it? If we'd made it assessed, they would have had to have done it. Do you know what I mean? So there are lots of different elements and different levels to this, I think, that are quite interesting that we can take forward, most certainly. I don't know what other people's opinion is.
Yeah, I think if I've got my microphone working. Have I got my microphone working? Is it fine? Good.
It's very quiet, so maybe shout from your perspective.
Okay, I shall raise up the level once more. Okay, so that should be a little louder.
Better.
Okay. There's a danger really in measuring the value of something from just purely attendance alone, and I don't think that should be a measure of success, because the true measure of success is actually the value of the message that's been imparted, not so much how many people watched it. So in terms of the value of the message, I think yes, that's been certainly of very high value, and as Derry said, we can return to this and sort of and use it again to our advantage, you know. So yeah, I think we have to be. I mean, it's what happens with education. I mean, the education that never drives itself. You can have all the libraries in the world and they'll be empty unless somebody actually makes you go there. So, you know, so that's our job really. When something is new and novel, then you get the attendance, and then naturally just sort of things sort of dwindle. That's just, it seems to be human nature with watching anything that's sort of media based. So we kind of put that in the box. That's sort of expected in a way. What we have, I think, is thanks to you, Jude, is a series of stuff that's actually of high value, and we can come back to this, and we can make this part of the educational process that we drive. And the drive of this actually comes sort of, you know, over the next few years when we revisit this, and formalise an educational process around it. So for me, this is not something that's been and gone. This is something that's been captured for us to use again and again in future. So yeah, but that's how I sort of look at it.
Because I know we had conversation, and we've had it before. In our, even if one person signs up and turns up, we still run it as there would have been 100 maximum capacity there. And so just to add to what Alan's saying, really, sometimes there's nothing better to kill the love of learning than the educational establishment and process kicking in, and then it's kind of forced and everything. So in one way, I think we were lucky to be able to trial this without having to go through that education bit and then setting them work and follow on and then assessing and then seeing if they fully understood and all that stuff. But it is interesting in how there's plenty of online courses out there, and I don't know what the stats are, but it would be really interesting to see how many people start 3 courses or whatever and actually finish it. It would be really interesting. It's probably out there somewhere if you can find it. But yeah, but I don't know.
Well, that's true of me actually. I think I've enrolled on 8 or 9 courses, and I think I've spent about 250 quid of my own money on courses over the last 2 months. So I've got an enrolment on Masterclass and loads of stuff through Udemy. And I don't think I've actually looked at 5% of them yet, to be honest with you. Is that a waste of money? No, it's there for me to come back to when I have time, and actually when my kind of my head's in there, because I know that all that stuff's out there, and I've paid for it now, so it's there, it's stored, it's captured, it's sort of, and when I'm ready to go again, and I sort of then I'll jump back in. So yeah.
I think that's a really interesting observation, and thanks for being candid about the reality. I have a good friend who works in publishing, and he was saying actually an interesting trait of people who buy books is quite often they don't buy them and read them. They buy them to stay on the shelf as a sort of mental, sort of anchor that they need to act or think in a certain way. And then, as you said, when the moment crystallizes, the book gets read. So I do wonder whether there's still, it's not to make excuses for a low turnout, but I do think there's still, I know myself, I'd done LinkedIn Learning for various companies that I'd worked at, and they do sometimes sit dormant, and then you have a moment that galvanizes your motivation. So I think it could be a blessing and a curse. You could say that we've put them online, there is no expiry, you come and take them at your leisure. And so maybe some students, as you alluded to, were thinking, I just need to get my exams done and then frankly unwind a bit, and I'll maybe come back to it in a week's time and then do my folio and watch some lectures. So I think that could be a factor, and I think I'd be happy to give you some running stats on whether that is my hypothesis is correct, or whether it just stays flat and dies.
I had feedback yesterday from after the chat in a message that he valued the students, like the fact that they were pre-recorded, the lectures, better than the Q&A, really, because it allowed him, as always, really to pause and come back to it, go back a bit, take some notes, have a cup of tea, and do that at your leisure, which sometimes, and I'm comparing that, if I'm trying to compare it with what we do in our normal lectures, you're in for an hour and a half, and we've got loads of stuff to get through, and we just kind of go through, and there's the reflection parts, stopping and allowing a bit of thinking. We expect them to do that, don't we, after they leave? Anyway, so yeah, we thinking a fair bit.
And I think conversely, right, we all do it. We skip over the bits that we know and are boring, and you go, oh, hold on, now he's saying something interesting. I'll tune into that bit. I think you made a bit of a joke when you saw me going through some of the entries Peridot a year ago, and I was pretty brutal at how quickly I skipped, but I knew what I was looking for, and I wanted to. My mic is low. Is that my mic? Okay, Okay.
I wasn't sure if you could hear me at all. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's a bit quiet.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. It's been okay for.
Oh, there we go.
For other
That's
things.
all right.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I was just going to say as well. I don't know about anybody else, but when I was watching the videos, they're not. It's not fluff. It's not light. There's lots of things. I've taken notes from every lecture. Things. I've got a 3.5 hour documentary to watch soon. So
which is a really light, fluffy one, as anyone who's watched it can tell.
Cheers, you no end that one.
But there's stuff to do. There's stuff to think about in all of the lectures, and I think it's possible that they're not just sort of sitting in front of it. It's not it's not an episode of Coronation Street where they can just sort of sit back and switch off. So it's possible that people are kind of pacing themselves and will watch things and engage with them kind of in their own time. And that's kind of the double-edged sword of it being online, is that they can do things at their leisure. They don't have to do it at our convenience, and they can kind of take it, pick and choose when they want to watch things and watch things out of sequence, as I did accidentally. But I think that's worth noting as well. There's stuff to do, there's things to think about, and they might not have had the headspace to necessarily sit down and watch. What is it? It's probably, is it 3 hours worth of videos?
Probably three and a half. Yeah, easily.
So I think that's worth noting.
I thought it was good as well because, like you say, there was a really good mix between the case studies, the real life experiences, and then it was backed up with the reference material and the must-haves and the takeaways. I thought that was quite a nice balance as well. A bit of everything in there, sort of reaffirmed lots of elements and why they were important. I thought that was really, really good.
One of the things I found as a do I call myself an educator? I suppose I've been involved in education for so been paid to do this sort of stuff now for what, 25 years? Yeah, ish, more. You can never force your own agenda either. You can never have education your own way as a teacher. It never ever works out as you intended it to work out, because you don't have strings onto the puppet. You have these virtual strings that you try and pull, but there's no direct correlation with you sort of playing with the things on top and actually the puppet actually dancing underneath. So that's a wish on behalf of an educator, that what you sort of implement and what you sort of put into lessons and so on, that doesn't always translate into the movement that you expect. But having said that, what really drives education is the sort of the quality that you put in, and sort of the I don't know, the effort that goes in and the honesty that goes into the materials that you supply, and the honesty and the force that you push those materials through as a process. So it's almost, there's a danger in trying to measure education quite so much. In a way, there's a cracking book out there, and it's written by Marcus Aurelius. If everybody in the world were to read that book, I think we'd probably be in a much better world. But the fact that the book is there doesn't mean that nobody reads it, So, but I think we're in a good position here. Sort of my mind is quiet in the sense that I think that there's something here that's of value, that's been captured, and it's there. I think that's always the measure really of education, is that is the message a good message, and are we making good use of the message? So I think with the videos that you've captured, Jude, it's over to us now really to drive this forward, because it is something that happens over time, and we shouldn't look to measure this in the short term. We almost need to come back to this in 5 years' time, and ask the students who are, who within those 5 years, when they've gone through college and out of college and into employment, then has it had an effect? Because it's very much a drip thing. I mean, there's stuff now that I sort of think of occasionally that, I mean, you kind of wonder, where did that come from? There's a thought crosses your mind, something sort of flitters through, and somehow something clicks and makes sense. And then I sort of analyze it, and it was something that somebody told me 40 years ago that somehow made sense yesterday, and it stood there for that sort of length of time, waiting for an opportunity to click. So whatever that person said to me 40 years ago, I sort of retained it somehow, and it was only when I actually, my mental faculties kind of caught up with the quality of the message that they gave me, that I made that link. And that often happens, like, with a 40-year time lag. So the whole thing is an interesting process for me in that sense. That all you can keep on doing is pouring in the quality. The measuring, it's not on a string. You can't yank it and the other end sort of moves.
No, I think I definitely connect with that sense of I'm still picking apart some sort of advice that I've had since way back, so I think that definitely happens. Yeah, interesting. I think that's a fair point, and I think I guess you could almost say that's the nice thing about having documenting these sorts of things, is that you can truly keep in touch with the students, and you could certainly envisage doing one of these and said, 5 years on, how did our students do? And it's not to say that it's always about these lectures, just in general, the course. I think that would be fascinating to do.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Obviously, Katie lives down the road from me, but obviously there's just been a power cut in our village.
Really?
All the internet had to just go completely off. Yeah, it's like walking around thinking, what the hell's going on? How your world ends when the internet sort of dips completely, isn't it? Yeah, sorry about that.
I think Alid was just recapping on essentially that you could almost say too early to tell for certain things, and some things you need a long view to see what things sink into people. So I think if that's a fair snapshot of what you were driving at.
I was thinking that a must-have kind of bank of stuff that's in the sort of professional practice set of lectures for me as well. There's lots of crossover from different modules and things. And there's one of those things that's going to be in the sort of bank of resources, most certainly, where they should be revisiting stuff continuously, definitely.
Another positive for me really is that I think it looks good, the fact that we sort of break out of our little internal team, if you like, and we bring people like you in, and that's something that's very difficult to measure, but I know it's of value. That the more of the sort of the external commercial voice that we can bring into our provision for our students, then again it adds to the credibility of what we're trying to achieve, and that's very hard to measure. So and I think it just comes down to the sort of the honesty and the integrity of the message, and and when the message actually is delivered with that little bit of passion and that little bit of experience that sort of that makes it genuinely worthwhile, then yeah, I think we're in a very good place that we've captured that, and we've been seen to capture that, and that it adds to the quality of the provision that we provide. So in that sense, it's been a huge benefit to us, because it adds to that, and I know Brett has done a lot of work on that, and he's continually working on that sort of stuff, and it is, that makes us stronger.
I think what's also going to be useful now is but when we approach somebody else to do possibly something similar, we can go, there's a link, there's 7 that we've already done.
Learn from it, yeah.
Absolutely, but and I think you mentioned at the start as well that, and it ties in what Aled has said as well, is the quality rather than just the perception and how it looks. So yes, it might not have been as glossy or as smooth or slick or fancy graphics with, animated text and all this and a theme tune, but if you take all that, I don't know, trimmings off, I think you're left with some clear messages, really. And when people watch it, it's like, all right, okay, so it is content and it is detail that they want, rather than, so this is what I do and this is my wonderful lifestyle. I think you get more value in the this kind of work, though, this caused me issues, this is where I hit that brick wall or whatever. And I think it's just, yes, I'm looking forward to send it out to a few people actually and see what we can do with them for September, because our teaching is going to be, well, it's going to have to be radically different, I think, at least until Christmas, even longer. So we've got to think in different ways.
I think one of the things that I mentioned to Perida yesterday that sort of has surprised me over this journey is, I don't know where you guys have been sharing it, presumably on teachers forums, but there's easily about somewhere between 5 to 7 design technologies tutors who are teaching A-level or AS level or whatever it is, even in different countries, who are picking up on this. And so I think it's not that we designed this all just to be about PR and recruitment. It was obviously driven by content, but I think it's an interesting soft metric to say that these tutors, these teachers are effectively advocates. They are people who are going to be preaching your message and saying, well, you might not have heard of Bangor, but go have a look at this. You might not have wanted to do London and the big city. Maybe you did want something that struck a balance between absolutely beautiful nature and still, a great degree. And I think the bit that obviously we tried to communicate in the slightly weird PR video was really to sort of emphasize the fact that I think that, of course, there are other universities which rank higher on some things than you. That's not a secret. But actually you massively punch above your weight on, from first year, you have 8 weeks of industrial practice, which I think Perida we went back and forth on, is this absolutely rock solid? Can we lead with this? And I think that's incredible, actually. I think that's a hell of an opener for, especially in a world where, frankly, certainly as as someone who's out in industry, I feel there's very little room for just academics in a purely theoretical. You have to have people who have come out of uni and already come preloaded with some experiences. And I think you guys are streets ahead of some courses. You leave them behind on that. So I think that's been, a really exciting evolution of doing this, is seeing, tutors genuinely wax lyrical about this. I've had some really lovely comments and have WhatsApped Peridor a few of them. So I think you can't put an easy metric to it, but I think something's working.
Yeah.
Quite timely that I ask. I don't know. Shall I ask Jude, the thing that Carl was mentioning the other day in the meeting on Wednesday, with
Please.
regards to becoming an associate lecturer. There's the opportunity.
Oh, right.
there's the opportunity for you to become.
Hold on now, hold on. There's a caveat. There's no money involved.
I'm glad you dived in there. But I think it was to do with that
I've
you
got
would
a
actually
gift.
get,
Is that you? Oh, I see. It says we're being gifted the 40-minute time limit, so not to worry.
okay. Yeah. So basically, our head of school, Carl, he was saying that there's an opportunity for people like yourself, because you've been working closely with us over the last few years with the conference and everything, and what's been happening recently, that you could become an associate lecturer for Bangor University if you were interested. And it's put forward to a board, and then it's considered that we put your CV forward, obviously, with the credentials that you have and everything. This should be an issue, but I think they give you a username, a password, so I need to find out, oh wow, isn't that fantastic? But it's the title as well. So I mean,
no, I'm very flattered. Yeah, I would love to take a look at that and see what it entails. As I hadn't really given it any thought, to be honest. I was just very, very proud and very excited to be doing what I've been doing. But yeah, that's very generous. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll find out some more details and we'll get it out to you as regards, the actual, naming title and what it sort of entails and everything. So we'll get that out to you. So certainly we'll put your name forward if you want us to.
Yeah.
I picked it up in some of the social media on Facebook, and it was like, look at these lectures. Jude Pullen, a lecturer at Bangor University, and I was like, I just kind of corrected them. He's not. Oh right, I'm just passing on what somebody else has said. So it's like, I'm just going to mute.
But yeah, maybe a happy mistake then, that it triggered some thinking. That's sometimes how it happens, isn't it? Now that I'm thinking of that, I'm like, I need to employ a few people like that to follow up and say things now. That you should give him a knighthood.
It's all part of the incremental, right?
That's I guess not that I want to be a downer on anything, but I guess that there's a part of me that can't resist a little bit of candid feedback on what we could improve. I really wouldn't shy away from that. Just it doesn't even have to be necessarily what was bad, but just what do you think, with the benefit of hindsight and the fact that obviously we, put it together fast in 2 weeks from literally Peridot saying go to it going live. So I think, of course, with more time and hindsight, you see things differently.
Go on, KT.
Well, I haven't got anything. I haven't got anything negative to say, but I was really struck by I really enjoyed the tone of the lectures. I think that you sort of struck a balance of being incredibly authentic and open, non-judgmental, really open-minded, and kind of both hands-on and provocative, but also with an amazing level of detail. So I'm not sure that's necessarily helpful in terms of sort of constructive feedback, but those are the aspects that that sort of resonated for me, and that I particularly enjoyed, and I hope will resonate with the students, that sort of bullshit-free approach to, well, this is what I've done, and speaking from your own experiences. But yeah, that really sort of open-minded approach that you take to whatever you're speaking about. You're never negative. You're just sort of very kind of balanced in the things that you say, and I think that worked incredibly well in the videos. Although, caveat, I haven't watched the last one yet, so I haven't quite had time to watch that. But
Oh, that's the best one.
oh, is it? I'm going to try and watch it later on.
I don't think you'll need that one particularly.
Yeah, I'd say same again. Like to reiterate that the pitch was spot on for me. Because if you think about our client base, the students that we've got, they're not really into the gloss and everything. Not that there wasn't that side of things, but it was a nice mix of everything across the board for me. as regards, like I said earlier, as regards the case studies, the balance between the theory, the way that you presented it, and it was sort of bite-sized, and it was sort of very, very logical. I really like that. And it was no messing, you know, it was warts and all, and it was just, you know, you were totally candid about your own experiences and how you were brick walled and how you moved on and what you took from those experiences. I thought that was really, really good.
Thanks. I mean, I got to give a lot of credit to Peridot on that one, in that we really did take some time to put the formula together and have a justification for why it wasn't 10, it wasn't 5, it was exactly that number, and why it was broken down into that order and then chunked into the first amount and the second amount. So that was wrangled for I would say sort of almost 10% of the project was just wrangling and getting the brief tight. So yeah, that's hats off to Peridot, got to say that. And I'm sure obviously Alad in the side of it as well, so it's fair to say.
Yeah, it's, I think. Go on.
No, you carry on. I was going to go on a different track on something, so you carry on with that.
I was just going to. It kind of one of the answers, options to one of the questions yesterday in the poll. It kind of, as with everything really, it kind of reveals itself as you're working through it. And what I particularly liked was that it was pretty quick, because in parallel with this, I'm working on another project which is going on for 18 months. And I've got to be careful because this is recorded, but that is a is a different set of stresses on that. And I liked the fact that, you know, when it was like, what was it, April, whatever the date was, so X amount of weeks preparing it, an X amount a week of just kind of promoting and kind of keeping the thing going. And I think there's a lot to say in doing it in that sprint rather than the massive prep and then rolling it out in a slow way to try and eke out every possible thing out of everything. You just throw it out there and see what happens and just kind of roll with it. So I kind of like that. Especially, I don't know, it might have been just at this particular time, but it kind of fitted the way of working, which was, kept me busy and going. I kind of liked it. Right, go on your one, Daryl.
So what have we missed out, Jude? Now that the series is done, what would you like to add, or what would you like to change?
The funny thing that happened is that almost I think I managed to satisfy one of the weaknesses almost on the fly. I don't know whether Peridot mentioned, but essentially I went and I presented this actually last night at 12 o'clock midnight to Pechakucha Global, of that I did essentially a retrospective of this whole process. So it got a bit meta. It was explaining how you do a lockdown lecture through Zoom to a Zoom presentation online. But I was basically making the point that I came to the conclusion that I was feeling like I was a bit of a sort of oracle in professing all this wisdom, when actually I realized very acutely that, you know, I was either stealing it from people that had already given me that advice, or indeed I was channeling, hold on, this person I really respect, what would they say in this? And so all of that prompted me to then go, well, hang on a minute, why don't I record a Zoom call interviewing? So I've interviewed 20 designers and creatives, and that's about to go live hopefully end of next week, and they're just finishing the sound editing for it. So I think that would be a really nice compliment, that instead of the lockdown lectures feeling like the Jude show, then it's flanked by basically saying, never mind what Jude thinks, here's a bunch of people who, and you know, I've interviewed someone who was a graduate who's just been out in work for a year, and so really recent, gritty, dealing with COVID, having to pay the rent, not living with mum and dad, all the way through to, you know, people who've been in the game for 30-40 years. So I think that was, it's nice to feel that, you know, dare I say it, they say trust the process with design. And I felt that by staying receptive and not just thinking, well, I'm going to get paid when I submit this and job done. I think it was actually a lot of inspiration from you guys over the past design conferences that I just really wanted to try and over deliver a bit on something and push myself. I guess the only other thing that I think, I truly don't know what the answer to this is, but I feel I would love some feedback from you guys, is that there's always this tricky thing of how do I get students to build more prototypes, in that I suspect probably statistics aren't high of people who've bought all the cutting mat and all the scalpels and the Arduinos and done something. And I think Peridot and me discussed whether we avail of one of the online competitions and use it almost as a provocation to just get students to cross a finish line. But we acknowledged the timing was a bit difficult with exams to pile on extra work. But I do wonder whether next time students aren't, and I don't mean in a bad way, I mean as in being honest about where I was many years ago, do they need a project and a deadline to force them to pick up that scalpel and force them to get that Arduino and get it done? Because I kind of feel that, did I maybe lead the horse to water, but I couldn't make them drink? So that's my only, slight frustration, is I didn't see a load of pictures from Peridot going, oh look, this is what the students have been making. One of them's built a this and one of them's built a that. And so I kind of thought, I'm still mulling over what I could have done differently. Sorry, long answer.
No, I think it'll tie in now. Your story of that book on the shelf and Aled's messages coming back years later, and it's what we do really is like who said that gardening is the most optimistic job ever, because you plant, what it is, you plant that seed without really never knowing if it's actually going to grow or if you're going to sit in the shadow of that tree. So you've planted a hell of a lot of seeds. You're just not going to see the tree at the end of it, are you? Or you might, but you're not going to see the wood. But
yeah.
No, I think we don't have to worry about that, because over the next coming weeks, it's like when you want to binge watch on Netflix, you're not going to watch it if you're really busy and you've got other stuff to do. You kind of build time in to have whatever time you need to then binge watch your favorite show or whatever. So we're hopeful they'll do that.
I've got a couple of things rattling around in my head at the moment.
Go for it.
Big like student fix.
Ooh.
So you don't do the fixes, you present it, and it's the student teams that do the fixes.
That would be great.
Work that at many levels. That could even tie into a national competition, so that it could then become a showcase of young people collaborating, doing some stuff to help other people, and it's given a platform. So it could be
I'd never thought of that.
There we go.
That's a good idea.
What's the commission now?
Well, the usual 50% will be fine.
That's it. But I wonder whether that, I don't know how serious you are, or if you're joking, but I'm taking it seriously. In that maybe that's an interesting thing. If the one thing I did learn from being filmed is that, boy, does it sharpen your mind on what you need to say, because you play it back and you go, oh God, I didn't get to the point. That took, how long was that? God, it took 10 minutes to get to the point. And so you shoot it again and you try and get it down to like 30 seconds. What have you been doing? What are you setting out to do? Why isn't it working? What's the user need? Nail it in 30 seconds. And I kind of feel there's one thing that I almost, I don't want to be blunt and say to students, but it is one of those things of, you go, look, if you can't pop up on Zoom and ask a question, are you sure you're really ready to go out there into the world and get a job? Because bloody hell, the competition's fierce, and it's like, if I learned anything being out in California, it's like those guys don't flinch. If that was Zoom, they would be popping up all over the place. That's just culturally, they're very like that. They're effervescent. And And so I do wonder whether, I suspect the students at Bangor have all the intelligence. I just wonder how to have a little more self-confidence that I started in the same place. I don't like speaking to camera. I've learned how to do it. It's a learned thing. I didn't I didn't start this way. And so I wonder whether if you do take a sort of big student life fix, whatever the wording is, forcing them to sort of diary cam it and make a little video of edited down to the important points, and you put constraints on them, like the video has to be 3 minutes and explain a year's work. I know how hard that was for the editors. That was brutal.
I was even thinking that that you become the next Kevin MacLeod. In that Kevin MacLeod did that thing for architecture. And
oh
and
yeah, the grand designs thing.
So you do it like so you sort of follow that series, but rather than have builders doing houses, you have teams of students doing the real projects for real people.
I think that'd be fascinating. I think the maybe this is we're recording this and we're telling the world, but then sometimes I agree with was it Paul Arden used to say, give away everything you know, and I think the implication of that is most people don't have the guts to go do it. So maybe we do put this live and we hold ourselves accountable. But it would almost be interesting, I think, again going back to my learning of going through this, of Jude isn't the oracle, but I almost feel would the benefit of be saying, let's say a student is working on something, but the impetus isn't to say what does Jude think all the time, but to pair up with someone who is an industry expert, who is someone who works in that field, and actually they're their mentor, they're their person who helps chaperone them to a better design. And I think just also being realistic, I probably couldn't spread myself over 30 students projects with that intensity and commitment. Whereas actually if they each had a mentor, that probably sounds quite achievable to scale. So
the interesting dynamic here really for me is that, we do stuff in college, you do stuff commercially and TV and all of that. How can we sort of help you, push you forward? And how does this help Jude go on to the next phase of what Jude does? And if this is a catalyst in any way, and if this is just something that sort of triggers something off for you, and moves that whole thing forward, whether that's nationally, globally, and if we can extend the reach of this, and this becomes just a small piece in a jigsaw of a greater piece of jigsaw, that's the biggest game to play, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the key to that biggest game to play is, as I said, it's not to be the Jude show. That's what I loved about the Big Life Fix. It was, I was one of 8 designers. So it was the fact that we were a collective that was powerful, not that any one of us was so talented that we could encompass every single solution. I think that was actually what made the show really strong. It's not to say that from an editorial perspective, of course, you have people, just as Kevin MacLeod is the presenter, but he's also flanked by an incredible team that do all the research, do all the production, film it, get it done. So I think that's almost an interesting thing of saying, what I think I've loved about working with you guys is, considering you're in the sticks, you have a very global attitude, and it wouldn't shock us to think, well, let's get a partnership with someone in Australia, let's get a partnership with someone in, God knows where else, but I think that would almost be the exciting thing of, like, how do we avail of the technology even when lockdown isn't forcing us? How do we continue with that mindset? I think that's exciting, if that answers the question.
So it's not so much what you can do for us, it's more what we can do for you, in that sense.
I think do together, yeah.
In true partnership.
Yeah, I think I would be the first to admit that I don't have the discipline that you do to deliver a curriculum. And I don't think that's something I'll ever fill those shoes. but I think it's probably fair to say that that's maybe not the right use for me. I think I probably am being deployed correctly as more of a provocateur, but you guys are still grounding it in the fact that you understand how to educate over a long period of time, huge detail. So I think that's the thing, is recognize strengths and weaknesses, or the value of what one party does over the other. So I feel that's an exciting way to look at this.
Cool.
Yeah. But I think I hope I've said it clearly enough, but it's been a real pleasure working on this with everyone, and it's kind of interesting. My head's a bit spinning to think what next.
Good. That's part of our job, is to turn things around and make people think. So that it's kind of it's what we're paid to do. So you popped in and we make you think. So it's not actually a debrief. It's more of a brainstorm session than that. So yeah,
it's a defaulter.
You've been PD.
It's the best stuff. It's it's a good shout. I'm genuinely interested to see what the next steps would be. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
So
Right.
any final words? I feel we're at a nice point of the cliffhanger of will they do it?
Dun, dun, dun. We need
Jeopardy.
some Batman style things coming in now.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyable. Brilliant outcomes. I had an email today from one of the students apologising that they didn't tune in yesterday. So even the ones, do you know what I mean? So
yeah, that
ripples, those seeds are definitely there. And yeah, there will be something coming after this for sure. So thank you very much, Jude. On to your next project now.
Okay then.
I'll just send a link once your chats go live, and we'll share that out as well. Yeah, cool.
That sounds good. All right then. Well,
right, I'm off
until we meet again.
Thanks very much for all your enthusiasm.
No,
Jude,
it's a pleasure.
That's the kind of that's the main strength of all of this, is the energy that goes in.
Yeah.
No, and it's been likewise. So thank you so much as well. It's always great. But yeah, have a lovely weekend.
We'll send you that associate. I was going to say professor, but it's lecturer stuff through the post. I'll try and twist you around for that one if you don't mind. Right, have a look at it. See what you think.
Indeed. All right then.
Okay.
Really good. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye, folks.
Oh, Jude.
Yep.
Can you we transfer this recording over when it's done, please?
I will.